Now he has a baby boy with your best friend. My ex-mother-in-law, Lorraine, sneered at me in the busy hospital corridor, her eyes gleaming with pure malice. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just looked at her, smiled calmly, and asked, "Is that what you truly believe?" 5 minutes later, the chief of surgery walked into the VIP room, flanked by two corporate defense lawyers and the hospital board director, and Lorraine's face lost all color as her hands began to shake. If you want to know how a smug family celebration turned into a total financial and legal disaster for them, follow them so I can see how far my story has reached. The trap my ex-husband thought he set for me was about to snap back on them. My name is Lena. At 32 years old, I finally understand that the most painful endings are often just beautifully disguised beginnings. For 3 long years, my marriage to Julian felt less like a partnership and more like a twisted psychological game where the rules were constantly being rewritten by his mother, Lorraine. She was an overbearing, cold-hearted woman who viewed her son as a prize and me as an unworthy squatter in his life. No matter how hard I worked as a medical research consultant or how much love I poured into our home, Lorraine always found a way to make me feel small. Julian, completely lacking a backbone, slowly turned into his mother's mirror, adopting her passive-aggressive sneers and icy dismissals. But the true devastating turning point came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon when I discovered the ultimate betrayal. Julian wasn't just drifting away. He was actively having an affair with Chloe, my lifelong best friend. The person who had stood by me at my wedding was now sleeping with my husband. When I confronted them, there was no remorse. Instead, Julian and Lorraine used my shock to orchestrate a swift, brutal divorce. They hired a ruthless attorney, hid assets, and smugly stripped me of almost everything we owned, fully believing they had left me completely broken and ruined. They wanted to destroy my spirit, but what they didn't realize was that by casting me out of their toxic world, they had accidentally set me free. A full year passed after the final divorce papers were signed, wrapped in absolute silence. Julian and Lorraine completely cut ties, comfortably assuming I was drowning in poverty, struggling just to afford a basic roof over my head. But while they spent their days celebrating my supposed downfall, I was quietly rebuilding my life from the ashes. I poured every ounce of my hurt, anger, and betrayal into my professional career. Within months, my dedication caught the attention of a premier healthcare network, leading to a massive, high-paying corporate partnership. I was officially appointed as their lead medical director, securing a level of financial success I had never dreamed possible during my marriage. I purposefully maintained a ghost-like presence, cutting off all mutual acquaintances to focus entirely on my growth. Meanwhile, completely unbeknownst to me, Julian was walking blindly into his own ruin. Desperate to keep up a flawless illusion of wealth for his mother and eager to impress Chloe, he began funding an incredibly lavish lifestyle they simply couldn't afford. They took luxury vacations, bought designer clothes, and accumulated massive credit card bills, all under the false assumption that his family business was indestructible. Lorraine cheered his reckless spending on, convinced her successful son was vastly superior to the ex-wife they had left behind. They had no idea that while their mountain of hidden debt was quietly growing, my silent success was about to cross paths with their fragile world in the most unexpected way. The narrative shifted dramatically on a crisp Tuesday morning at the city's top hospital, catching me completely off guard. I was standing near the pristine VIP wing, dressed in a sharp, professional white blazer over a dark navy blouse, reviewing a set of confidential patient care protocols on my tablet. The atmosphere was bustling, filled with the sterile scent of antiseptic and the low murmur of medical staff. That was when a sharp gasp cut through the noise, and I turned to see Lorraine stepping out of the elevator. She caught sight of me instantly, her eyes widening before narrowing into a familiar, venomous glare. Assuming I was either a low-level clinic worker struggling to make ends meet or a patient who couldn't afford proper health care, she marched over to me. A cruel, deeply satisfied grin spread across her face, wrinkles creasing around her heavily made-up eyes as she took in my presence. She didn't look at my professional badge or notice the respectful nods the passing nurses gave me. She only saw an opportunity to twist the knife one last time. She adjusted her expensive designer purse on her shoulder, leaning in close enough for me to smell her suffocating perfume, eager to brag about Chloe giving birth to Julian's new legacy baby boy just down the hall. Lorraine crossed her arms, her voice dripping with venomous satisfaction as she delivered the cutting line that she had clearly been rehearsing for months. Leaving you was the best decision my son ever made. Now he has a beautiful baby boy with your best friend, a real family, while you are left here with absolutely nothing. She paused, letting her words hang in the air, expecting me to break down, to flee in tears, or to give her the satisfying dramatic reaction she desperately craved. She openly taunted me about being easily replaced by Chloe, laughing aloud about how Julian had supposedly won the breakup and moved on to a far grander life. I stood my ground, maintaining an absolute, chilling composure that seemed to catch her off guard. My heart didn't race, and my hands didn't shake. I looked past her expensive jewelry and her desperate attempts to hurt me, seeing only a bitter woman clinging to a fragile, fleeting illusion of victory. Instead of getting defensive, raising my voice, or explaining my success, I looked her directly in the eyes, delivered a calm, effortless smile, and asked a single question. Is that what you truly believe? The sheer coldness of my response left Lorraine momentarily unsettled, her smug grin faltering for a split second as she tried to process my lack of fear. But her arrogance quickly rushed back, and she sneered, completely unaware that her world was about to collapse. Exactly 5 minutes later, the dynamic in that sterile corridor completely shattered. The heavy double doors of the VIP wing swung open, and the chief of surgery walked into the room, flanked by 2 sharp corporate defense lawyers and the hospital's executive board director. Lorraine smirked, likely expecting them to escort me out for bothering her, but her jaw dropped as the entire group stopped directly in front of me. The chief of surgery bowed his head slightly, greeting me with immense respect. "Good morning, Director Lena," he said clearly, his voice echoing off the walls. "We have the quarterly operational budget and the new research expansion contracts ready for your final signature whenever you have a moment." Lorraine watched in utter, paralyzing shock as the board director handed me a leather-bound folder. She stood frozen as she finally realized I wasn't a struggling divorcee or a low-level clerk, but the primary corporate benefactor and newly appointed lead director overseeing this entire medical facility. The color drained from her face, and her hands began to tremble violently against her designer purse. The illusion of her superiority evaporated in an instant, replaced by a suffocating panic as she realized that the woman she had spent years trying to diminish was now the most powerful executive in the building, holding the ultimate authority over the very institution her family was currently relying on. I turned my gaze back to Lorraine, my smile fading into a look of clinical indifference as the true, devastating twist was delivered. Julian and Chloe's newborn baby boy was perfectly healthy, but the financial house of cards his family had built was about to fall apart. To secure the premium VIP suite and avoid paying their massive outstanding debts from Julian's failed business ventures, he had submitted heavily falsified corporate financial statements and fraudulent insurance documents under Lorraine's direct guidance, foolishly assuming a busy hospital administration would never notice the discrepancies. As the lead medical director of this healthcare network, one of my primary responsibilities was the final review of executive billing anomalies, and I had flagged their fraudulent file just an hour before this encounter. The 2 corporate defense lawyers stepped forward, pulling a set of official legal documents from their briefcases, and presented Lorraine with an immediate, terrifying ultimatum. The network was denying their insurance claim entirely due to intentional misrepresentation, meaning Julian was now personally liable for the full, unsubsidized medical costs of the delivery, alongside an immediate freeze on his commercial accounts. They were facing imminent corporate litigation for insurance fraud and grand larceny, legal troubles that would instantly bankrupt Julian's fragile business and completely drain every remaining cent they had. Lorraine stared at the legal notices, her breath hitching as the trap her son thought he had set for me snapped tightly back on them. The immediate aftermath of the confrontation unfolded in absolute silence as Lorraine broke down in bitter tears, her smug arrogance vanishing entirely. She clutched the edges of her designer purse, openly begging me for mercy and pleading with me to drop the fraud charges for the sake of her newborn grandson. I looked at her with a calm, unwavering gaze, refusing to back down or shield them from the legal consequences of their own choices. Over the next few weeks, the law ran its course. Julian was forced to file for complete bankruptcy, and Lorraine had to sell her home just to cover the legal fees and outstanding debts. Meanwhile, my life continued to flourish in a beautiful, peaceful direction. I focused on expanding our medical research facility, knowing that true justice isn't about seeking revenge, but about building a life so successful that the actions of your enemies can no longer touch you. Now, I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you have done? They will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching, and